This was actually something that started when Elena and I were talking. We were talking about women of wisdom, and I was just looking for something I could contribute to the group. And I have many things I can contribute, but maybe not of so much interest for most of you. But I served on 4 public boards. Now I'm serving on 2 boards. So I just wanted to share this with you. I also want to say that if you want to speak to me one-on-one, I'm also available to do that. And I will mention that at the end also for everyone. So welcome again, and just a little bit about myself and how I got to serving on boards. I had a first career. I'm by the way from Europe. You can probably tell from my accent. I had a first career in consumer goods and with FMCG companies and in consulting. And then I had a second career in fintech and commerce tech, with mostly around payment companies. And then during the pandemic, I had just joined my first public board, and during the pandemic, I realized that I was making way too many compromises for my career. I was literally deprioritizing everything that I hold dear, and I needed a change in my life, and I was just weighing my options. And at that time, I thought it would be interesting to serve on boards. I like strategic work. I like influencing. I don't need to manage tons of people to be happy. And I thought it would be interesting to focus on board work. And I pretty quickly ended up serving on 2 and 3 more boards. It became a second or a third career really for me. And that's where I'm today. I see it as a career, and not a full-time career, but a part-time career, and I really enjoy it. And I wanted to share a little bit today of what board work means and how you could think about it. It's very important to realize that every board is different and every board journey is different. But I mean, boards are more different from one to the other than companies are different from one to the other. Board depends, of course, on the governance of the company, how big the company is, but board cultures are also very, very different. And there is, by consequence, there's not a single path to a board seat. And I just want to talk about that a little bit. And we will cover private boards, VC and private equity boards, and public boards. And I read your answers to a lot of the questions that Elena had posed, and I realized a lot of you are actually interested in VC and private equity boards, which are boards I have not served on, but I have considered to serve on them, and I've spent time thinking about those. One thing also, as you think about boards, it's meaningful work. It is actually real responsibility. You are maybe not directly accounted as a person one-on-one like you are in a corporation, but boards are highly accountable these days. That's why we all carry very high insurances because we are so directly accountable. It's not glamorous. It used to be glamorous. I think there was a time where boards were meeting in nice resorts and things like that, but that's also over. We just meet in normal business hotels. We have good dinners, but that's about it. So I mentioned before, there are very different type of boards, right? There are non-for-profits that we all know. There are family-owned boards, there are VC boards, private equity boards, and public boards. They have very different governance structures. Not-for-profit boards are mission-led, and when you are considering a not-for-profit board, the most important thing is really to align your mission and what you find important with the mission of that not-for-profit. Don't think necessarily of a not-for-profit board as a stepping stone to for-profit boards, unless it is for networking. I mean, you might serve on the not-for-profit board with somebody who can help you get into a for-profit board, but you are not learning the type of governance that you need for a not-for-profit board. So make sure that you know why you are joining non-for-profit boards. And I think several of you are already on non-for-profit boards. I found it at time highly frustrating and not so rewarding. But so I would be very careful in thinking about not-for-profit boards. Family-owned boards can be really fun if you are close to the family. And this is actually also the only way of getting on a family-owned board. There are, of course, a lot of companies that are family-owned. If you have an in with a family, if you want to represent the family on the board, that can be very interesting. But it's usually not the type of governance and expertise that you contribute, but more being an ally to the family. VC backed, as you know, VCs are growth oriented. They bring you usually on because you have a very specific expertise, like scaling a company or consumer or data. They want somebody with very specific expertise. And if the founder brings you on, the founder wants an ally. So you are less independent. You are always representing a VC or the founder. And similarly with private equity boards bring on people with deep expertise. Very often the role between an advisor and a board member bleeds a little bit. Often private equity boards require a lot of time and a lot of time investment. And often private equity firms bring on board members that have public board experience because they want to get the company ready for public board, for a public life. And then public boards are highly regulated. The role of a public board member is more oversight and guidance. And it's relatively formal and structured. And this is something you need to know, and it's often not fun. It's often quite tedious. So before you try to get on a public board, you need to really think whether this is something you want to do. In terms of numbers, there are a lot of not-for-profit boards, a lot of family-owned boards, a little less VC and private equity boards, but still many more than public boards. But on the private equity and VC boards, you have much less independent board members. So there might be one or two independent board members on a VC or private equity board, whereas in public company boards, you have the vast majority of board members are independent. So it's a little bit about what you really want to get out of this that you need to think about. Let me just stop here maybe for a moment and see whether you have questions, because I want this to be interactive and not just a slideshow. Are there any questions about the type of boards and what to consider and think about? No, okay.
I actually have one. Hi,
Okay,
Danielle.
hi.
It's actually, thank you so much for sharing this. It's already super helpful, and we're not at the end yet. It's about the requirements to get into each. I know you mentioned what they're kind of looking for, like the different types of boards are looking for different things, but would you say that the requirement is similar across the board, or would you say that the pro
No, that's a great question. I mean, not-for-profit boards, depending on the size and what they want from board members, the very large ones want high donations, and the smaller ones want people to work, right? That's most important. If anyone can serve on a not-for-profit board, anyone in the business community. That's just the expectations for not-for-profit board. Family-owned boards usually want an ally. The more sophisticated ones might want somebody with deep expertise. Venture boards also want an ally or deep expertise. Venture boards, and I know some of you have served on venture boards, but if you have experience with smaller companies, with startups, you're well qualified to serve on a venture board. You need to understand a little bit the different founding and funding rounds on venture boards, but in general, you don't have to have been an executive in a public company or in a large company. Small company experience, leadership experience in a small company is a good expertise to have and good experience to have. Private equity boards want also demonstrated deep industry expertise or very clear functional expertise. I mean, the private equity board representatives and private equity advisors usually know the industry well, have had leadership and operating experiences, CEO experiences in the industry, or very specific like HR experience or product leadership experience in a company of similar size, in a similar life cycle, or a public company. So you don't have to have public company board experience or public company C-level experience to be on a private equity board. For a public board, I would say you need to have had C-level experience in a public company or divisional leadership experience in a large public company. I don't think that a public company would take the risk taking somebody on a board who has only served smaller private companies, even if the person has really deep functional expertise. You have to have had leadership experience in a public company, and you have to have had a seat at the table. For instance, when I joined my first public company board, what swayed them was that I had basically presented at every board meeting of two of my last public companies. I wasn't a C-level in some cases, but I have had present a lot of board leadership and board presentation and board participation experience. So those are the differences between deep expertise and having had a seat at the table. And I would also say the work, other than governance and oversight in a public company, since you don't really operate in the board at a board level, a lot of the board work is not problem solving, right? The problem solving is done by the executives in the company. And it's more judgment. And you have to have had judgment experience. You have to demonstrate that you are not just the best problem solver in the world, but that you know how to make the big judgment calls. And if you can show that, I think a public company would still be interested in you. Any other questions for the different types of board? Or any additions? If you have other experience, please bring them up. As I said in the beginning, every board is different, and I'm generalizing at a high level here.
I have a question. When you say family-owned, this is family-owned companies, not family offices, right?
Right, yeah, I'm talking about companies, yeah, not family offices. So the modern director profile, I think director profiles have changed dramatically in the last 10 years. In the past, I mean, if you were a white man and were in a golf club, you had a really fairly good chance to get on a board. It was about networks and your buddies, and yeah, whom you knew. This has changed, especially for public companies, but even more so for private equity firms. They want people with real expertise. You have to demonstrate that you have operated, but that you can also make the governance, that you have experience in governance and oversight. Expertise that is really in demand is tech. This is about cyber security, AI, how to use tech. There are still companies who are still in the digital transformation, but tech in general is always a good expertise to have and to demonstrate. Go-to-market and scaling. Very often international go-to-market experience is very helpful. Cyber, of course, and then right now, finance CFOs are in high demand. It always changes a little bit. 2 years ago, it was all about cyber. Right now, a lot of CFOs are in high demand. But boards don't want really deep experts. They don't want a CISO, or they don't want somebody who is an accountant. They want general managers with general management experience, but with very clear expertise spikes. And increasingly, board service is becoming a career. because there are always times on a board where the board work requires significant time involvement. And if you have a full-time job, a senior full-time job, we all know that there's not much space really for something else. I have had boards that had challenges like taking a company private, or we had a short attack on one of my boards where for weeks and weeks I was on board meeting calls every morning for 2 or 3 hours. So that's something to think about, whether you actually really have the bandwidth to serve on a larger board. And then people need to trust you, and they need to like you. It's very much about chemistry, because you work so closely with these people that you don't really have a time to really bond with. I mean, you meet like 4 times a year, so they need to immediately like and trust you in a way. Which in a company you always feel like, okay, if I hire an executive and I can't really read him quite yet, there's time, and I can onboard him or her, and we will start understanding each other. In a board, it kind of needs to click immediately. And then the question is really, are you ready? Are you ready for a board? And Elena made a really good point. A very important question is, why do you want to join a board? Is that just something you feel like is the next step on your career, on your CV, in your career? Or do you like the type of work, which I think is very important? Do you want to still make money, or don't you care about that? I mean, all these things I would think about. And I think, Elena, you have decided board work is not for you, right? Do you want to share with the group why you have decided that?
The why of joining a board doesn't resonate with me. And, I have other things that I'm more passionate about. So it's kind of an opportunity cost, kind of thing. Because if I say yes to this, I have to say no to other things.
And I find that a very interesting and fair answer. I have served on boards with people who obviously just saw that as a next step in their career. And they didn't have the time, and they didn't have the passion. And, in the end, the executive never really trusted them. So you have to go full in when you do this. In terms of readiness professionally, it's really, you have to have a track record. You have to demonstrate that you have run something, have won something, have started something. I mean, you have to show what you have done. And as I mentioned before, you have to have had a seat at the table. You have to, and that doesn't mean that you have to have been on a board, but that you were part of board discussions, and that maybe the board members in your company respected you. Board members in the company you work at are always great sponsors for board seats. But just demonstrating that you have been in the room is really important. For board work, it's also important to think of what you bring to the table, and don't stretch too much. Be very clear and very cognizant of what you can bring to the table. This is not like going for a job or applying for a job. For jobs, like we are always taught, we women are always taught that we don't have to fulfill 100% or 80% of the requirement, and men apply for jobs where they have 20% of the requirements and they get them. For boards, this is a little different. And it's a little different because you don't really have time to learn on the job. And the job is not about problem solving, where in the end you use facts and figures. The job is about opining and guiding, and it becomes very obviously very clear if you don't have the depths of experience to reach into. So I would think about very specifically what type of board and why, and what you bring to the table. And I mean, people need to respect you, obviously. If you have a seat at the board, the executives of the company need to respect you, and your fellow board members respect you. But you don't have to demonstrate amazing leadership. I mean, you don't actually need to show like a real charisma in the boardroom, like you have to show when you're a CEO of a company or leading a large group of people. Nobody cares about that in the boardroom, really. So that's a little bit different to think about yourself. And once you start thinking about yourself in a little bit different way, that then also translates how to express your value proposition and how to have a board conversation, a board interview, and how to you write your board resume.
Daniela, I have a question on the prior slide, if that's okay. Um, yeah, this question on the why, I think I'm still struggling a bit with what an ideal answer to a why could look like, because maybe it's a little, you know, obvious that it's like, obviously career advancement, it increases your remuneration if you're on a board, you get to meet more people. But I'm curious if maybe there's a framing that's ideal or expected for the why that is not as obvious as, career advancement and eventually maybe even making more money, meeting more people. Is there an ideal kind of archetype answer to?
I think there's a different one for you yourself and the one that you would talk about in a board interview. In a board interview, nobody cares about your career. This is again a little different for when you interview and bring somebody on board. You want somebody who is eager to progress, right? When you hire a team member, you want somebody who is ambitious. At the board, it's more about the company. The board wants you to articulate that you really care about the industry, that you care about the mission of the company and the company's success. For yourself, whether you want to serve on a board, I think in the end, for me, it's a mix of all of these things. I like the type of work. I actually also like the people I'm on boards with, because you work with people who are highly experienced, but they don't have to show it anymore. So I actually have more fun with working with other board members than I have with my colleagues in a company, because it's less of this politicking. It's although there are board politics too, of course, but it's a different dynamic on a board. And if you like that, I think you have a reason. Yeah, and your reason is not the one you talk about in board interview.
Yes, exactly. That's the distinction. I'm happy you made that, because there's all like, I think answering to the board, maybe that's the easy part, right? You can like craft like it's an answer that really does address the value you're bringing to the board, where it was more that piece of for yourself. And maybe a reframing of the question is, what are the benefits that you would say are of joining a board, without putting aside the obvious ones? And I think you've answered it, because I think that, for example, that politics one it's actually a very important one, right? It changes the day to day and what the interaction actually looks like for you and what your work looks like on a day to day.
Yeah, and the other thing is that you work at a really high level, right? You get sort of the high level strategic thinking much faster than in a company. You don't have to deal with all that noise we all dealt with in companies. You get to the point very, very quickly, which really speaks to me and the way I like to work. So I enjoy this. What I don't enjoy is the formality of a board. But you have less of that in a private equity board. So you can think about doing a private equity board. If any
Patricia
other
has her hand raised, and you probably can't see raised hands, Daniela. So Patricia, go ahead.
You've covered a little bit of this, but Daniela, you mentioned that you really like the type of work that you're doing on public boards. Can you say more about that work, and what is it that you do, and what about it appeals to you?
Yeah, so the board work has different parts, right? There's one that is kind of oversight and risk management. And the oversight part has a lot of strategic conversations and strategic thinking. And I can give you an example on one of my boards. We have an innovation initiative. And actually, I was really brought onto this board because of that innovation initiative. And I'm very much at odds, not about the why of the initiative, but about the how of this initiative. So now we have decided in the board to stand up a special committee to look into this initiative and I'm leading that committee. And now I'm bringing together all the different facts, figures, insights for the board to make decisions and guide the company. So I'm not doing this for the executives. I'm not trying to convince the executives otherwise. I'm trying to get the board to the level of understanding so that the board can really think about this initiative in the right way. I find that interesting. I always find it really interesting to think about how I convince other people and how I present information. And this is one step removed because I'm doing this with the board and not the executive. And then it's the board roles to do it with the executives. And then, of course, I will be heavily leading that, but I like that type of work. So it's all the type of work you do in a company in terms of doing an industry analysis. Now, of course, with AI, it's completely changed, but talking to experts, bringing experts to the table, bringing experts to board meetings, setting up the right conversations, asking the right questions with a group of people who don't come from this industry and who don't understand the specifics of this initiative, but who are all very experienced and very smart. I enjoy that. Another example was when we took a company, the company I was on the board of private. We had very difficult governance and majority challenges. This was a Canadian company, and to navigate this and to negotiate, we ended up negotiating the sales price of the company, was just at a level that I had never worked at, even in a C-level position in a company. Yeah, those are the things that I enjoy. What I don't enjoy is going to risk registers, which we do, and things like that, right? But there is a type of work that is really at a level that it's almost always about opinions and judgment. I find that really more interesting than problem solving at this point in my career, because problem solving I've done my whole life.
All right, let's focus on how you get that first board seat.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Right.
So how do boards recruit? And now I'm talking about the larger boards, right? Not the small VC boards, but the larger boards, PE firms and public firms. They all have skill matrices. They look at what skills do they need on the board, and that can be industry or functional. And then they know what skills the existing board members have, and they track when these board members will roll off. And then they hire to that skill matrix. It happens very, very rarely that a board gets completely overwhelmed and falls in love with a board member because of his or her personality or expertise and brings that person on. It's usually about filling a spot. And this is great because you can research this. This is all the skill matrices and how the board members fit in the skill matrix is all public information. So you can research this and you can find out where board seats might open up that fit you. A lot of board searches are now recruiter-led, especially the public boards. In the past, it was 70% networking or even more networking. Now it's much more recruiter-led. All my 4 board seats came through executive search, not through networking. I don't spend any time on board networking, and which might be different from what you have heard. Networking can also lead to board seats, but you don't have to do that if you don't have time. If you have considered all this, right, what your why is, what your experience is, what boards want, you have to really work on articulating your board value proposition. And it's your experience, where you're recognized, where you can demonstrate expertise, also what you enjoy. And again, own your lane. You are good. You are all good at something. And you just need to find the board that wants that something. Don't create a something to fit an open board seat. I think that's very important. And it's different than in a company, right? In a company, we can massage our CV in a certain way, but for board seats, I think you really have to stay in your lane.
Is it domain-wise? Sorry, Daniela, when you say stay in your lane, or is
Or
it
be true to who you are and what you can bring to the table. Don't make up things. Don't overstretch your experience. Um, when you go for a job in a company, if you have 50% of the experience, it's maybe enough. But for board seats, you really have to fit, because boards have a lot of choice on where to recruit from.
Got it. But you said initially about a lot of the people are not the experts in the company domain. Are they looking more for discipline expertise? So, for example, CFO rather than CFO in the aviation industry? Like how to look at it?
That completely depends on the board. You have to think about what you think you can credibly say you can bring to the board, and not make it sound like this is what the board needs. Some boards will, I mean, there will always be search briefs for board seats. So read the search brief, look at look at the skill matrix of the board, what they are looking for. They might just want a CFO. They might want a CFO with a very specific expertise. They might want a CFO with an accounting background, or they might want a CFO with more of a finance background. So that's what they want. But who are you? First, start about really articulating what you bring without even thinking of what a board wants.
Got it. Thank you.
And then you create a board bio and a board resume. And I think the board resume is more important than the bios. The bios, frankly, most people don't really look at all that much. There's a lot online on how to write these CVs and bios, and there are actually people who do it for you. But the main difference that is that you have to focus more on the oversight and governance and judgment calls you have made in your career. But you also have to show what kind of hard impact you had. But just focus on what the board really, what board work really entails versus operating work. So governance, insights, judgment, I think those are the three big areas to stress. And it needs to be very concise. So 1 page, maybe 2 pages, but not a 3-page resume with all the roles you have had and all the projects you have led.
Daniela, hi. Could you give an example when you say the two main things, governance and judgment? And how does that, I'm trying to ground that in what that would be in a bio or resume.
Yeah, for instance, you could say I prepared presentations for our board of directors, helping them to evaluate new business opportunities. Versus I have led an industry analysis.
Okay.
Okay. Something like, or you say, okay, I have led a sales force to sell the product at 100 million, or to scale the product to 100 million. And instead of saying that, you say, I have developed the insights, the strategies, and the training programs to lead my team to scale it to 100 million.
So one being more like the operator level.
Yeah, the CV, the company CV is more operating and what have you achieved, whereas the board is more about the larger insights that you have developed or judgment calls you have made to lead a group of people towards something. Okay. That's always what we look for. We operators, I mean, operating experience is great, but have you done a little bit more than that? Because you are not going to be the operator. And that's the switch that is hard for some people to make. from being the operator to being in the boardroom, right? You don't tell people what to do anymore. You just ask the right questions. And you just have to give the board that you apply to a little bit of confidence that you have done that.
Great, thank you.
And there are I actually checked, there are a lot of examples online that you can use. And there are firms who help you develop these board bios and board resumes. Visibility and thought leadership is always great. So if you're visible and you speak in conferences, give keynotes, always great to have your name out there. And then it's also good to join these networking organizations. I mean, we have a great one here in the Bay Area, the Athena Alliance, and it's really to learn and have your name out there and meet other people who are maybe already on boards. And all of these organizations have lists of board companies that they share with executive search firms. That's what really executive search firms do. They go to these organizations. They really don't search LinkedIn themselves very much anymore. So there is a value of being a member of these organizations, and some of them are free. Basically, you just join, put your resume, your board bio in there, and you have your name out in the right databases. And then I would, as I mentioned before, chemistry and reputation. I mean, people want friendly boardrooms, and friendly not in a non-threatening way, but people want board members who can have the hard conversations, but it needs to be in a very civil way. I was on one board that didn't have that, where sometimes people were yelling at each other in the boardroom. And it was one of the reasons why I ended up leaving that board. I just don't need that anymore in my life, frankly. Being abused by another board member, that's just not what board members do. And in a company, it's kind of happening all the time, right? Unfortunately. And then networking, I mean, networking is important. So a lot of board seats are still happen, or board placements still happen through networking. But I would do it very carefully. You don't want to be known to be out there to look for a board seat. That's, I mean, people who are desperate for board seats are usually not get hired into boards. I would also avoid these pay-to-play firms. I have never heard of a board actually using them. So use good people to network with. Are your former board members? If you are in a company and you know the board members on your board, network with them. They can make introductions for you. Former bosses or senior people in the companies you worked for during your career who are now on boards, who can make introductions. Don't spend your time networking with other people who are looking for board seats. Those are not the people who are going to help you very much. Unless you enjoy them, that's a different thing. But to get on a board, find the people in your career, in your life, who are now on boards, and get warm introductions, get their input. I think that's worthwhile doing. I personally don't do that. I've never done it. And this comes to what Elena said before. I weigh this. This is not how I want to spend my time. I'm doing it now with people who come to me, mostly women who want a little bit of help looking for boards. So I'm open to that, to meet with somebody mostly virtually, and help them think about their board journey. So yeah, look for people in your life who are on boards. Entry points into boards. If you feel maybe you're too busy at your day-to-day and at your corporate job to join a board right now, to join a large company board, or you just don't find anything. Sometimes these board searches take a long time. I mean, I was interviewing for one board seat for over a year, which was great because I knew the company very well when I joined them. But I think advisory boards are a great way in. not-for-profits or non-for-profits with strong governance. Look for the ones that have clearly strong governance so that you learn a little bit about governance and that you can also point to that for some experience, life experiences. And then VC startup boards are a good way in because you can clarify your time commitment. They probably don't expect you to spend a lot of time with them. So those are all good experiences to have on your resume when you are going for your first private equity or public board. And then when you get to an interview, especially a public board interview, just do your homework. You have to be really well prepared. Really knowing the industry, the competition, read about the companies, like 10Ks, proxies. I always look on Glassdoor. You learn so much on Glassdoor. Even if it's probably mostly disgruntled employees, you still learn a lot about the company. If you know any current or former directors, research the board, the people they have on the board, and understand where the gaps in their board are. And then again, chemistry and mission alignment are very important. In the end, the board of the company that you interview with will sit down and talk about the different candidates, and all the candidates will be pretty much experienced and qualified because they wouldn't get to that point. And in the end, they will bring the person that they think they can work with best. So don't make it too much about yourself and sell yourself. They need to understand that you can really fit in that team very well. So take action today. I'm saying that you can if you are interested or if you are even remotely interested, think about what you can do today. If your board journey is 10 years out, join a not-for-profit board. Or maybe think about your next corporate job and how it can help you to a board seat. If your board journey is a year out, audit your digital presence, clean up your LinkedIn, make sure it all starts speaking to potential board skills. Draft and share your board bio and your board CV. I mean, it's very nice to have that ready. And when somebody asks you, you can just respond very quickly because sometimes they want this within days and board searches get closed. So if you don't hit like the time when they are looking for candidates, you might actually not have the opportunity to join. And then just ask for intros and practice your story and practice your pitch. This is very similar to how you would prepare in a way for a corporate board, but think long term. Corporate board, I mean, I've always just thought about my next job. I haven't really thought about building a career. With boards, you have to think long term a little bit because once you are on a board, you actually most likely spend longer time on the board than you spend on any job you have ever had. I mean, the average tenure of board members in the US, I think, is 8 or 9 years. And that's average. Yeah, I said it, it's a long game. Build your brand, but it's really a long game. And people always tell you have to be very careful what boards you take. And that's true. You have to be very careful. But your first board seat, I would say, don't think too much. As long as a company has good governance, there are no obvious problems. There are just not that many board seats available every year. And getting the first is the most difficult. So don't set the bar too high for the very first one. And then know your story. I mean, and trust your story and trust the process. As I said before, don't stretch too much. And yeah, slow and steady wins the race. This is not a race. This is not something where you go out crazy, like looking for a job. When you need a job, you need a job. You can't do that with board seats. I mean, these board recruiting processes take a long time, and building a board resume takes a long time. So it's a long journey.